If we let that happen, very bad things happen, and there has to be a fight. And there's a specific effort that's been launched against people that hold Bitcoin to try and get them to be compliant in that sense. And that's through controlling the discourse in the media space. There needs to be a desire among Bitcoiners to return to the original ethos, not the opposite. There needs to be a fight for that. People need to care about that again. Sort of like 2008. Oh, look, the private banks have destroyed the economy. Now we need the public sector to come in and rein them in, even though Obama's cabinet that was supposed to be doing that was literally chosen by Citigroup, right? They're the ones that are going to come in and they're going to rein these in, and these are the policies and changes that need to be made. But actually, it's the bankers that wrote the changes that need to be made.
Today we have Whitney Webb giving us her prediction for Bitcoin in 2024 and why we're on the brink of a major event. She warns that the major players at the top do not have your best interests in mind at all. Webb exposes the ulterior motives for Larry Fink, Jamie Dimon, and other major banking giants. The control the elites are attempting to take over Bitcoin, stablecoins, and a huge majority of financial assets is unprecedented. And Whitney sounds the alarm on what's happening right now and why this is unlike anything we've seen in history. Let's get right into the video with Whitney Webb as she gives her prediction for what's coming in the days and weeks ahead. Also, don't forget to check out our friends over at Jamie Tree Finance, who have just launched a daily 5-minute crypto newsletter. It's a fantastic analysis of on-chain crypto data and breakdowns, and the best part, it's absolutely free, covering expert predictions, breakdowns of on-chain crypto data, and any breaking news that you need to know, all in a nutshell. Click the first link in the description and enter your email to join over 5,000 others in becoming a better crypto investor right now.
I think the cornerstone of the response really does need to be self-reliance, because if you're hoping on people in the private sector solving this problem for you because they don't like ESG, I don't think that's enough. And talking about this public-private play, it's important to keep in mind that what happens, just look at the Treasury Secretary office alone. So like in Clinton, it was Robert Rubin, Goldman Sachs. He helps repeal Glass-Steagall. And then when that whole bubble pops in 2008, Goldman Sachs' Henry Paulson is Treasury of the Secretary. Then it's Tim Geithner, who worked under Larry Summers, and Robert Rubin is Treasury Secretary under Obama. And then it's Steve Mnuchin, who was involved in the 2008 financial crisis and whose dad was one of the top guys at Goldman Sachs, and he was also Goldman Sachs. So what they do when they're in power is that they create policies that help benefit them. They came from Goldman Sachs with intentions to implement policies that benefit Goldman Sachs. Right. And so generally what happens is that when the private sector wants something, or they've created a big market for something, they've invested lots of money in creating something like the carbon market, and no one's using the carbon market. They are going to then use the public sector to force people to use the carbon market. And so they're trying to do that through the guise of climate emergency, right? And that's not working. So if that's not working, how will they go about and how will they do it? Well, like Mark and I have discussed before, they're trying to go about it the private sector route. Oh, okay, you guys aren't interested in programmable, surveillable money if it's emitted by the central bank. So if it's emitted by a private bank, maybe you will. We're likely going to get set up for something like that, where they're going to try and make existing money worthless. And if you want your money to be worth anything and maintain any sort of semblance of purchasing power, you have to use financial products X, Y, and Z. And they're all going to be programmable and surveillable, if not by the private sector, by the public sector. And they're all going to be interoperable. They're going to be all these different wallets and digital ID systems that look like they're different companies, but they're all the same, essentially, in terms that they can export all their data to the same central global database. And, that's essentially the goal here. So how do we fight against that? Don't use the database, don't use the digital wallet, don't use the digital ID, don't interact with the system. And I think also, I think Bitcoin is obviously very key to their plans, but they need Bitcoin to stay, as Larry Fink said, a technology for asset storage. They refuse to have it be a currency. And of course, the World Economic Forum, the United Nations, all of those guys are not good at all, right? But it's a public-private thing. And so there's been a lot of focus on how the public sector part of this is bad and corrupt. And the answer that we're being led to is, oh, well, let's just put it all in the hand of the private sector. But the World Economic Forum is the private sector, and they've created these public-private partnerships because it converts the nation state into the enabling environment for all of these policies developed by, unelected oligarchs who are stealing people's wealth through these insane wealth transfers, and are the people that ultimately control, the Federal Reserve, for example. The Federal Reserve is seen as, the central bank, it's a state-connected entity. To an extent, I guess that's true, but people should know in the US that it's commercial banks like JP Morgan and Citigroup that really own and run the Fed. And people forget that. So if you're going to move from, Jerome Powell to Jamie Dimon, I don't really see there being any functional difference in what that means for the common person. You know what I mean? And so essentially what's going on here is that you're having a mix of both happening here. And, if they're not going to succeed in selling programs through the public sector, they're going to go to the private and be like, let the free market decide. But these are not free market people. These are career financial criminals. These are like the Drexel Burnham Lambert goons. And people like that, engineering new ways to engage in fraud and steal.
Webb foresees a looming economic catastrophe driven by collapsing fiat money systems, rampant inflation, and bank failures. She suggests that a transition to a Bitcoin standard is on the horizon as the world grapples with the impending crisis. She asserts that the promises made by the Federal Reserve and central banks have been hollow, leading to excessive money printing and a proliferation of poor investments. And with the aftermath of the recent inflation surge, Webb says this will not lead to a return to the status quo.
And that's what a lot of these Wall Street giants have been doing for a long time with complete impunity. And the idea that they should, be given full free rein to do that just because public sector bad, that's the trap I think they want us to fall into. But the other side of this is what's happening in places like Argentina right now, where people have lost so much of their purchasing power. So before Milei came to power, I think the poverty rate was it was insanely high. I think it was something like 60%. And then Milei came into power and devalued the currency by 50%, which led to a massive loss in purchasing power for Argentinians on top of that. Now Argentinians are so desperate and are being told that they're undergoing quote unquote shock therapy designed by a JP Morgan guy, that they're doing WorldCoin. They're scanning their eyes in the Sam Altman orb for coins and a cattle tag, a digital ID. And the idea is to have that be your access to the internet, and using, these tokens and these stable coins, using Tether, using USDC, whatever supported by Mercado Libre's giant entity, Mercado Pago, which is also integrated with Brazil's biggest crypto exchange, Mercado Bitcoin, and then there's Ripio in the mix, which is partnered with all of these guys too. They're going to control all the rails that stuff runs on. And that's where people are running because their money has been so devalued and they have no alternative. And I think that's ultimately the goal, is to get people on programmable, surveillable money by any means necessary. So if you won't do it because you're like, oh yeah, this is a way I'm going to use JP Morgan coin and beat the Fed CBDC, if you're not going to get suckered into that, then, it seems like they'll use destabilization and desperation as a way to get people to onboard into the systems that they're creating. They're not just going to spend billions of dollars creating these systems and have no one use them. They're going to try and use either, desperation created by public sector policies or by private sector policies. And they're the ones that are going to come in and they're going to rein these in, and these are the policies and changes that need to be made. But actually, it's the bankers that wrote the changes that need to be made, right? If they need the Bitcoin blockchain for asset storage, and presumably, if we're right about what's going on in this article, which we seem to be, carbon markets, they need that blockchain. How do we invert their plans and use the Bitcoin blockchain so that it's the tool of financial freedom it was heralded to be, because they can't get rid of it without scuttling their own plans.
No.
Right? And I think a lot of that is because a lot of money and effort has been put into specifically homogenizing media discourse in the Bitcoin space, because they want Bitcoiners as much as possible to be compliant, while Larry Fink and his ilk do what they want with Bitcoin and make it what they want it to be, so that people are content with number go up and sort of the Sailor-esque talking points that have gotten a lot of, a lot of people have heard those versus what you just mentioned, from example. There needs to be a cultural shift in Bitcoin in the opposite direction of what this Diego guy from Rootstock said, where he's like, we need to drop the whole, stop fiscal irresponsibility of the banks and central banks, and be a challenge and threat to their power. We have to drop that if we want to get rich. I mean, that's the mentality there. And I feel like the Sailor mentality really isn't that different from that. We have to push people in the other direction, because if we go in the direction they're pushing those, people to go in, people that want to drop the ethos or whatever and make Bitcoin just a tool for Wall Street. But it doesn't involve everyone's financial enslavement, and it doesn't enable the fiscal irresponsibility of the commercial and central banks to dump all the irresponsible debt generated by their money printing into Bitcoin and be like, oh, problem solved, keep printing forever. I mean, that's basically what they want to do.
Webb warns against the entry of powerful financial institutions like BlackRock into the Bitcoin space, saying this is definitely a negative development in crypto. She asserts that these institutions are set to control a significant portion of the cryptocurrency supply, and emphasizes the importance of resisting this obvious influence on the market. The price of Bitcoin is sitting just above 62,900, still up over 40% since the beginning of 2024. Webb predicts major Wall Street giants will be responsible for the biggest monetary collapse of our lifetime, and this will happen much sooner than anyone thinks. What do you think about her prediction for Bitcoin and where we're headed in the first half of 2024? Comment down below. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. This is Library of Wealth. We'll see you in the next video.